being as smooth when I click the blue go live button in LinkedIn.
But we should be live now.
Well,
I think.
we're getting there. So there's this like delay, which I think just ended. And now if it'll let me hit the go live button, which it just did, we are live, confirmed. Welcome. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to our third edition already, Willem, of trying to help people out with some onboarding, usually HubSpot related, but there's a lot of, I think helpful
Overlap between all
takeaways,
platforms
right?
and all products as well.
For onboarding in general. That's right. How you doing, man?
I am pretty well. And yourself?
I am. It's been a fun week. And I think it's important, like, only because I like speed. I like the pace of change sometimes, even though I still get a little overwhelmed. I'm enjoying myself doing shows like this and trying to help other people keep up, with that change, which is one of our ultimate goals, with the show. And I appreciate your participation in that goal, especially when it comes to a topic like onboarding. And I think today we're just gonna go through what all the kind of the points that you want to consider when moving through an onboarding. And
Yeah,
why don't we just
but
dive in?
likely we're going to take it slightly in a different direction that compared to what everybody will be expecting. But yeah, let's try to share my screen and try to kick off.
Let's do it. And I like breaking through the status quo, so that's music to my ears.
Yeah, I'm just which want to share, so bear with me.
Yeah. And this is
And fingers
especially
crossed, you
when
should be able to see the screen.
yeah, we can see it. And I mean, this is a good place to start, so I'll just let you dive in here.
So instead of looking at the onboarding first, my thought for this week was like, let's start with where the customer is actually coming from, and let's consider the customer's journey before they come into onboarding. Then let's look at onboarding from that perspective and take it from there. So where it really starts for me is with sales, because if there is no sale, you won't go through onboarding. And what exactly happened during the sales process? What if you're a sales rep, what is important? Is it important that you tell everything about the product and about the deal, and that you go through all of the features of the platform in the case of HubSpot that you're about to sell? Or do you just want to go home early and close the deal and have a decent paycheck? It's either or. It's a little bit, and maybe this comparison isn't fully in line, but let's say, Chris, that you're in the market for a new car. What you want the car to do is take you from your home to the supermarket. You go to a used car salesman in this case, or a new car, doesn't really matter. And you see a car and it's nice and shiny. And you walk up, there's the salesperson, and the salesperson looks at you. They notice that you look at that it's nice and shiny. If that salesperson starts a conversation with you about the excellent quality of the car stereo, will that really help? Will that just extend the sales process and potentially make you feel like, yeah, but I'm paying more for something that I don't really care about? So what the salesperson should really do is focus on your pain, identify the pain, focus on the pain, sell based on that. And that, in the case of a lot of customers that purchase HubSpot, is one thing. And that means that most of the buyers buy a point solution. And I know we have the hug for the customer platform. That's not what you want to hear. But it kind of is the reality. You purchase a point solution. And then what? If you're a salesperson, do you actually consider the renewal? I'm gonna say no, because let's face it, you only get money for the original sale. So as long as it's a 1 year deal, then happy days. There's no issue whatsoever. Do you care much about the handover to onboarding? Or is it really sold and done and dusted and the money is in the bank? Do you really care about identifying different opportunities? Maybe if you can sell more, but only if you can sell more. So you're going to try to not necessarily uncover additional pain points. You're going to try to focus on as little points as you can. And that is why we just look at the main thing, the awareness, the education, the selection, and hopefully closing the deal. And this is a basic sales funnel. I mean, we've seen them all in different shapes and forms, but this is basically what they all look like. From a company perspective, I'm not just talking about HubSpot, but any SaaS or subscription-based product. How much of the revenue is actually coming in from the first sale and how much from the recurring revenue?
It's a powerful way to think about it because it's got to be the latter, the recurring revenue.
Yeah,
At least if you're doing SaaS right, I would think. But that's a good
yeah,
point because I love thinking about this. Like, we definitely want to highlight the sales, person's role in this. But so much of this is, happening alongside, product led growth situations, free trials, options for upgrading, and so much of the confusion in past years alongside HubSpot is like, okay, this notification I got is telling me this. Now I'm talking to you, salesperson. And I think that kind of might challenge, kind of like you might want to, at the end of the day, you do need to get clear on the pain and the problem that that person is trying to solve. But know that especially SaaS has a habit of maybe manufacturing some problems to be solved that definitely impact the initial request and what the users say they want, right? And
yeah.
if we're having that conversation in sales only, onboarding, and other teams, that's why we always talk about the handoff. The handoff here is almost always, it's like from a consultant and coaching perspective, it's like an easy thing to go look at and just know that you're going to find a problem, right? Because the communication between those, that's the most common place where just the experience can fall apart, where it was made to be a certain way on the front end. Now we're a customer. Now we're in onboarding. And all of a sudden, expectations, and I know that's where you're going with this, but this is why it's like moving up through the process. And this is why I'd say like the funnel, there's another Slack community, from the growth team. Like the funnel, I don't know that it's done anybody any favors at all.
I
Right.
think that the funnel makes a lot of sense for one-time sales. So let's just say that I sell you a product for a lifetime. Or maybe even I'm going to say I'm going to sell you a car and I don't do maintenance. I just do the sales of the car. And I assume that I will be out of here in 4 years' time. So I'm not going to sell you a second car. It's just a one-time sale. That's a funnel. That's a perfect example where you shouldn't think of anything else but the funnel, from my perspective. If you're thinking about, let's say you buy a printer or something like that, where I know that you will be coming back in about 3 years' time, because in 3 years' time you want a new printer, then I should be thinking about different things. But anytime there is a once in a lifetime purchase, nah, for me personally, funnels are great. But that's like
Yeah, that
1% of all purchases max.
right. And even then, I think where it gets misapplied is understanding that is 100% an internal construct to help you manage the things that we see on the right:
Yeah,
prospects, leads, opportunities, deals, and revenue, which buyers care about none of that. And like funnels, the reason they do like kind of take team behavior in the wrong direction is that buying behavior, like I could visit the same dealer, I could visit three different dealers, I could be doing test drives. Maybe my car gets fixed in the meantime, and now I don't need the car anymore. And that something happens in the future. I've seen a bunch of ads in the meantime. That takes me back to one of the three, and then I buy, and it's like this nonlinear journey, right? That, like you say here, it is one directional. That's how funnels work,
yeah,
and the buying process is very much, you know, back and forth.
yeah.
And so, one of the things that I like to challenge on is that even as you just mentioned, like usually this handoff, this onboarding, or the funnel ends when somebody becomes a customer, right? Most often that is a paying customer, as in cash
Hopefully,
exchanged, right? But then we have free trial situations and we have experiences up front. Like, what if we decided that as soon as there was a value exchange, whether it was money or not, that person is a customer? Now, onboarding takes place, you know, throughout the entire process almost. Like, this is onboarding you to the experience of doing business with us.
exactly. And that is why this picture is from Winning by Design, and they have a great book about all of this called revenue architecture. But that is why basically there's the bow tie model. And even this is not complete because you should halfway through everything you should use the bow tie, and for the other half you should really use something like the flywheel. So even that doesn't make everything perfect, but it really shows like, oh, you have the purchase decision, and then you have onboarding, which is just a step. If I look at HubSpot, the onboarding can take up to 90 days. And what I mean with that is every customer gets up to 90 days. And if you purchase HubSpot and you don't book a call, after 90 days, the onboarding has been done and you successfully onboarded despite you had not a single call. And that is why realistically in onboarding, there is no drop off. But if you don't have a call, do we set you up for where the real revenue factory is? And that's the retention and expansion.
Yeah. And I'm starting to like, man, it's starting to become clear. Like, we talk about like this disconnect between SaaS and other spaces that maybe take longer to adopt technology. You know, obviously, from a manufacturing background, and I'm always digging into why there's these changes, why there these disconnect. But also, these are very successful companies that don't touch any of the concepts in SaaS, and like how are they being successful, and understanding that like when you're selling a complex physical product, like generally the way it actually works, our sales managers, almost everybody involved can take like a account manager role where they're in like full funnel involvement, right? Because that's what's required for
Yeah,
these customers to be successful with these complex products. So even though there's an onboarding team, the salesperson is still very much involved. Even the pre-sales team or the technical team that's supporting is very much involved. They might even do some of the training themselves, right? They're always the point of contact after the sale, right? Because they're kind of the point person on who's going to help based on that specific situation. So it's starting to dawn on me. It's like, this is also why, like, when we put platforms in front of them like HubSpot, and it's not easy to do some of those things because it hasn't been built out to take handoffs into account or to do things like they recoil and they don't want to use the system that gets in the way of that level of customer experience.
But the question is, how do you look at HubSpot? And that is where I see a lot of issues. People have a business process, or they think that they have a business process, but realistically, they have nothing at all. They did not want to invest in RevOps or anything like that. And then they think, well, we're going to hire HubSpot. We're not really going to invest in onboarding or anything like that. And after that, everything is solved, right?
Yep.
And that
See the
is where
leads.
it, yeah, it will just work. And that is just not the case. That's why I mentioned previously, for me, HubSpot is a tool. And it's nothing more than a tool. It's not a strategy. HubSpot does have and recommend strategies, but HubSpot itself is nothing more than a product.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic product, don't get me wrong, but it's still a product.
Yeah. And it's a tool, like you say. And this is where, like, everybody loves the hammer and nail analogy. It's not even like everything has to be a nail. It's like, if you've learned how to use hammers and you can only like hit it overhead like this, and now this, like, you see this new hammer and it can only work if you got to do like underhand or from the side or something, and you try to use it overhead, right? It's not going to work as well. And I think that's what we see in terms of, to grow a business, to sell to customers and make money, there is a process always. It's just usually not documented, which means it exists in everybody's heads. It's very reactive. I've experienced this week, working with the client, trying to understand the process. And so I'm there once a week to try and learn from being around. And what I noticed is, and I continue to learn from this, that when I ask somebody how a process works, right, and there usually isn't documentation, like, so much gets supported by the verbal communications to just walking around the office and say, hey, like, this is what you got to do. This is the next step. And I have to say, no, I'm going to pull that, exactly what you just said. I'm going to pull it up on this website. Is this what you're talking about? Is this thing that we're both looking at right now? Like, yes. Okay, great. Now I understand the process. But to get there, it's like this habit of, and that's how they try to build out HubSpot, right? Since there's no document, we're talking to different people that think about these things like in practice when they do it, and there's like paper involved and they actually get the shipment out the door. You're forced to do things physically to do that, right? But when you try to take it to digital,
Yeah.
the easiest thing to do is say, oh, this is how it works physically. I need it to look just like that in HubSpot, right? And that's where we start to break down, like, okay, why are we investing in this tool?
But not only that, what I also see a lot is, let's say you have 3 different sales reps and they all have a very fixed process and they know that their process is the right process. And they know that the other 2 are doing the same thing. But you have 3 entirely disconnected processes where realistically, even if you would pick the worst of the 3 and would say, we're going to be consistent and we're going to have structure, that would be a win.
Yeah.
And
And
that
it's
is the part where we should really think about a revenue factory with processes and documentation and that sort of thing.
yes.
But on the other hand, before we get there, we're talking about onboarding. And to kind of get back to that, keep in mind that a customer, let's for now say a HubSpot customer, just purchased a point solution to send emails. And that's it. Forget about customer platform, what HubSpot can do. They purchased a point solution. Do you think that you can justify an onboarding spend of, let's say, 20K for a point solution? Or will they take the simplest onboarding that they can to basically do the job that they hired HubSpot to do? And how do you go about that? Because the 20K, 40K, 100K onboarding, that includes RevOps. But that is not a point solution as they just hired. And yes, I'm going to say hired because that's how I look at HubSpot. You hired the thing to do a job. And that is where we should really consider what actually is onboarding and how do we set something up so that eventually we will get to the customer platform bit. But for now, we're gonna create a point solution. And for me, that really is like, we should be talking about the initial impact that customers are looking for. We should set a general foundation for the recurring revenue, but this is onboarding. This is not where we create the recurring revenue. That is one or two steps further down. And this is where we should really realize we're not doing RevOps here.
Right.
We're just doing our bit, which is one part in the whole, well, not funnel anymore, but process.
Yeah. Can you go back to the previous slide real quick? Just want to back one more. Because I think that's where, so between onboarding and retention. So when I, the diagram that I like to share, this deliver first impact part between onboarding and retention in many models is a stage in itself, because you don't get to retention until you've confirmed that they believe they are receiving the value, like the value and expectations that they were promised have
Yes,
been delivered, right? Which should be, I think we're in agreement here based on what you just said, that is the singular goal of onboarding, right?
exactly.
This is
And
what we said you were going to buy. Here it is delivered. At the end of this process, we should be able to both sign off and say, I'm getting what I purchased.
yes, and keep in mind, winning it by design calls that first impact. I call that initial impact. Well, tomato, tomato.
I'll give you that, tomato. I think that's a fair nuance. So yeah, to
So,
your point, like that's like, because there's lots of people that get confused on the role of customer success and like, this exchange, the order management teams in industries are often what they call it. And that's where it's like, that is the first step, right? Defining what is supposed to be happening, like in
yes,
onboarding.
and setting the expectations, because if you don't do that, then halfway through you have a different point of contact, and that point of contact doesn't realize that what's been sold for the onboarding is the point solution plus, and I'm going to keep it at that name, and is expecting to get a complete onboarding in the platform where everything is set up. So be super clear on what we're going to do and that we are going to focus on the initial impact.
Yeah. And this is where, like, with HubSpot specifically right now, this is a huge challenge for the ecosystem, and why, like, as much as we empower the people like sales and people doing onboarding, as much as we empower them to do what we're talking about here, there is this external zeitgeist with relationship to HubSpot, product updates, and the LinkedIn echo chamber and people making videos and HubSpot, just making new things available, that will has the capability to impact expectations during the process, and that is out of your control, right? So all you can control is, and this is why the value of the system of record is so important, so that you can be very clear on what was promised, how it was delivered, what was said, what were the words used. Because it's okay to, like, there's just expectation management to be done in this process, right? Because there's opportunities to upgrade, but they might not need to upgrade. Like, this was your original goal. If it's not the original goal, that's okay, but that might not be covered by what you purchased. Like, being able to kind of have conversations like that, I imagine it's pretty important during this process.
For me, it's extremely important because let's say you purchase HubSpot and we're just going to give a number. During the purchase, you expected it to do three things. You go through onboarding with me and we're going to deliver on five things. After that, you think back about what during the onboarding were the possibilities, and you think about 20 things. What you realize is that the onboarding sucked because I did not do a really great job, did I? I didn't show you all the 20 things. I didn't set up all the 20 things with you. So you're going to be unhappy. Are you really going to renew? Are we sure at this point? While if in every meeting I would have said, look, these were the things that we promised. We are over delivering. There's more room for growth. Does that kind of in your mind go like, yeah, I should renew? And that's a
Yeah.
totally different conversation. So that is why it's so important to make clear what exactly the onboarding is.
Yeah. And I think that's just so underrated. We think it can be easy to think like, well, it's definitely easy for people to assume communication that is happening, that it's not what people are thinking, that they're not, right? And if we understand that customers just want to be heard, seen, understood, and have their expectations met, it's okay to say, uh, like, being able to paint the picture of what could be or what they might have access to, so that they don't get surprised after that, right? Even if
Yes.
it's something that wasn't mentioned at all, it's very easy to say, why didn't Willem show this to me? Like, he should know that I could have used this for my business, right? So all we're doing, we're not asking everybody to be 100% expert on how, it's pretty impossible to do that right now as everything changes every day, but be aware
And if
of
you are,
that
you're not
there's,
anymore tomorrow.
right. And just have an awareness that there is likely, especially when you sell it as a point solution, just make the customer aware. Like, probably there's definitely room to grow. There's definitely other opportunities for you. We're happy to address that. Just know that we're not going to do that. We're not going to address those things in this process, right? And just setting it up, they can't be like, there's no surprise later. They can't say, "Oh, I'm not getting that value was withheld from me." Like, just a lot of things go away, and it's better to do that than to like hope that they don't, see it, right? Because they're gonna see it, right?
They're definitely going to see it. Still, for me, everything is about how do you not just set the expectations, but how do you also keep track of the expectations
Yes,
and
which is the system of
identify. And
record.
that's exactly what you mentioned, kind of identify the low hanging fruit. What is the additional value that you can generate potentially? And that is if I would go back a couple of slides, that is the point where you're going to look at delivering recurring impact and what is the additional impact. How do you make sure you keep hitting that. And that is again the point where you should be considering, how do you measure something? That's RevOps. How do you report on something? Should we create the reports like that, where you actually measure the progress? And who does that?
The team, the tool that they're using, whether it's verbal conversations, paper notes, printed out orders, or HubSpot. Like, can we just compare those? No, we're not going to do that here. But it's like just sharing, just keeping the customer informed just has way more value than most people expect. Like, most of the reasons that people choose not to do that are just kind of misplaced, misunderstood. For me, it's always better to err on the side of, making sure the customer knows something, because the last thing you want to do is create a picture of uncertainty or surprise, or, those are the things that get in the way of, you know, of renewal and retention.
Exactly. And like you mentioned before, we should really be focusing on the retention. So ideally, during the sale, you should already think about, okay, so what are the main points? Where can we help this customer grow, and how do we retain this? But we should not lose track of what a salesperson's role is. And especially in the early stages of a company, the goal is likely grow at all costs. Now, HubSpot has passed that stage, but keep in mind that if you are a company in a very early stage, you may not necessarily think about the retention. All you will be thinking about is, how do I grow drastically and rapidly so that I can scale, so that I have the budget for further development of whatever product you have. And keep in mind that I'm going in a different direction than where the company HubSpot is or where the product HubSpot is. But if you're building something for yourself, consider that maybe you are actually selling a product that is only going to be really finished in 2 years, as far as a product is ever finished. But how do you get there? How do you bridge the 2 years? And that is grow at all costs. And that is where, sometimes that one is slightly more acceptable than at other times. And there are reasons why people still in sales use the funnel. And this is not about what is the right way or the wrong way, because I have a very strong preference there. And that is indeed the bow tie.
Yeah. It's more about just like a structure, a process that gets followed consistency. Then you can ask consistently. Then you can ask your people to focus on the things that we're talking about, managing human behavior, human communication. Like, these systems don't replace people, right? They empower them to do all the human things that we're asking them to do that they never make time for. They can't make time for because they're, sending emails that could be templated. They're, heaven forbid, like attaching emails into the system of record manually because their systems are connected. Like, that's the kind of stuff I've seen people copy and paste from emails into their systems. That kind of stuff happens in ERPs all the time because those are systems not built for managing communication. So we could spend lots of time talking about that, but I think this was a great, another foundation. We're just setting foundation to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Like, if we don't start there, then it gets a lot harder to learn from each other and establish, where we are, right, and where we want to go.
And I think that for next week, it will be a nice exercise to actually go through what the steps for an onboarding for HubSpot would be.
I think that's a great idea as well. Until then, Think about your handoffs. I keep saying that specific thing, but ultimately that's the goal. Like with this full platform, got multiple teams now, multiple responsibility sets and roles across the organization to serve this single customer journey. Think about where those handoffs are. Think about your own onboarding processes and how you sell your product and bring customers onto it, right? Find that opportunity and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.